And here's a real-life example of what happens to some of the situations Stephanie described. When you have extraordinary debt to GDP, when you talk about Reinhardt and Rogoff, and you talk about downgrade of a credit rating agency. And by the way, the credit rating agency thing is a little bit personal, because I joined Treasury in May of 2011. It's supposed to be a quiet year of learning, and 3 months later we were downgraded by Standard & Poor's. And that was actually a really challenging time for staff, because it meant a lot of late nights, it meant a lot of work, and it meant trying to understand what the implications would be. Well, we have a real-life example, right? So on the right-hand side, you'll see the debt to GDP of Japan. On the left-hand side, you'll see the 10-year JGB rate, which is like the benchmark security rate of the government of Japan. So that debt moves up. Those arrows are showing downgrades by the credit rating agencies. And what happens to the yield of the 10-year JGB? Just a long slide down, right? And what this is saying is that the analysis you use for corporations or people who cannot create their own currency is not applicable to the analysis of a developed country sovereign market. And empirically, you can build whatever model you want, but here's a real-life example. And it's a massive example going on right now. The Bank of Japan has engaged in a massive quantitative easing program. And the real debate that's happening at the BOJ in Tokyo is, are there enough bonds to buy? Not, is there too much debt? And they actually have a hard time sourcing those bonds. And I say this because the Japanese were one of the first to kind of experiment with this kind of combined balance sheet. And not now. They actually did it in the 1930s, right? Sadly, their finance minister was killed by the military, but that was for completely different reasons. All right. So, and then of course, this is us. This is showing what the 10-year Treasury's performance was, and that's that horrible summer of 2011. Where we had one of our first debt ceiling crises. So 2 years later, we have one that's almost more awful. We were downgraded by Standard & Poor's. And of course, if the credit rating of debt goes down, I mean, what happens if your FICO score goes down? Your interest rates should rise. Not so. A massive rally in the yields of 10-year treasuries, right? The market actually understood, to some degree, a lot more than what policymakers seem to articulate, which is that this is not, this idea of solvency is not the right way to look at a developed country balance sheet. So, I only have 4 slides, but I want that rules of the game to be well understood, because it is often not, right? For years, you've had people say, look at Japan, they are going to go bankrupt. And markets have tried to actually implement that view. They've tried to short Japanese government debt. They tried to buy credit default swaps on the Japanese government's liabilities. That trade is known as the Widowmaker trade, because no one has ever made money, and in fact they got wiped out trying to do it. Because the interest rate and risk premiums that are set by those rates are determined, and can be determined, by a central bank if it chooses to do so.